excited. I love this time of year. It's my favorite time of year. The Sydney Writers Festival. Amazing authors from all over the world and all over Australia converging in this beautiful city, talking about books and reading and writing. Oh, I just love it.
And what a great day it is. It's going to be fantastic. So Kate, who's first up?
Jennifer Egan is our first author. That's right, Pulitzer Prize winner. What a beauty. That's right, so her new book is called Manhattan Beach, meant to be brilliant.
Jennifer, welcome to Sydney. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us at Word of Mouth TV.
It's a pleasure.
What I'd really like to ask you is, have you always wanted to be a writer?
No, I wanted to be a doctor as a kid, and I was very ghoulish, and I wanted to be a surgeon actually. And then I got a little squeamish when I became a teenager, and then I wanted to be an archaeologist. So writing was kind of number 3, and I got there at about 18. And so, but really from that point on, I have not wavered.
So, what was your first writing like? What sort of stories were you telling?
My writing, I think, was fairly uninteresting at the beginning. I think I was someone who really developed slowly and began very conventionally, and I think one of the big challenges for me was to discover my process, which is really about getting beyond my conscious mind into something that I can't foresee. And so that was when it started to get a lot more interesting. And for me, that means writing by hand, which I do completely for fiction, writing and editing, always by hand, because I'm trying to meditatively get out of my conscious mind into territory that will surprise me. And once I had kind of figured out that trick, I think my work got more interesting, but it took a while.
So do you write the story by hand and then type it up?
Yes, I write by hand, type it up, and then I revise on hard copies by hand, type in the changes, and spit out a new copy.
That is a fantastic process, and it would slow you down immensely, I imagine.
Yes.
An important part of the process.
It does slow me down. I mean, it's very inefficient in a certain way. I mean, it's very, as a journalist, I write on a computer and I'm fixing it as I write it. But if I do that with fiction, then I'm thinking too much and I'm not going to get to the interesting stuff. So it's really about something closer to dreaming in that first draft. I'm trying to access my unconscious.
And what was it like for you to win the Pulitzer Prize? That must have been a life-changing moment for you.
It was. It really was. It's rare that one moment can be so important, but that one really was. I mean, I think the main thing it did was just help me find a lot more readers than I had ever had, especially internationally, and that's been such a joy. I mean, I feel very lucky. I had never won a raffle before. I felt like I went from that to winning this huge thing. So it involved a sort of reconception of my own status as a lucky person. I really feel very lucky now, which is always a little uncertain. Luck is fickle.
And did you find it hard to go on and write the next book after such a tumultuous period?
I found it hard to write the next book, but I think that I would have anyway. I mean, it was a real change of gears to write outside of my own lifetime, because I don't write about myself or anyone I know, but I do use times and places from my life. So not being able to actually envision physically the period in which I was writing about was very hard. It felt almost like having all of my limbs sort of cut off. So in a certain way, and I think because of that, it was a very long process between 2005 and 2010. While I was working on other books, I was also interviewing people. I got involved in an oral history project, and I was trying to learn about the New York waterfront during World War II, criminal life. There's a lot of crime in this book. The Brooklyn Navy Yard, which was the largest builder and repairer of Allied ships in the world during World War II, which I hadn't known. And also deep sea diving, which is a big part of ship repair. So those were all, and the Merchant Marine, those were all worlds I knew nothing about. And it was really a joy to meet people because this is a period that still exists in living memory, and hear their stories about these remarkable moments of their youth. So in the course of that 5 years, I think I developed almost an alternate memory bank that consisted of other people's memories, not mine, but I had enough textures and anecdotes that I began to be able to write more spontaneously as a result.
Oh, that is just wonderful. And research can be such a huge part of a writer's job, can't it?
In this case, it was the most fun part for a long time. I mean, I felt so nourished by the research, and it felt so important, even when by any other standard it was really arcane. I mean, I would be on the elliptical machine reading a book called How to Abandon Ship with very specific instructions of what to do if you're lost at sea, and I felt like this was incredibly relevant, but clearly it wasn't relevant to my real life. So that added to my faith in the project, actually, because I thought this wouldn't feel so relevant if it weren't going to lead somewhere.
So Jennifer, as you know, Word of Mouth TV, we love to celebrate books and reading and cooking and food. And so I'd really love to ask you, do you cook?
Well, I'm a hesitant cook in certain ways. I mean, my husband is a great cook. He can just throw ingredients into a pan and somehow it all tastes good. I love to bake. And I love to make salads. That's two very specific areas. I guess if you eat enough salad, you earn your baked dessert. So maybe they fit together, but it's not very nutritious without some protein in there. But those are my two areas, I would say.
And what sort of things do you like to bake?
Well, my grandmother used to make a lot of pies, and she had a great pie crust recipe. So I make cherry pies, peach, apple, pecan. They're really amazing, I have to say. I feel I can't even take credit because I'm using the recipes of someone else. And then I've moved into cakes. So I love to make great big birthday cakes that are just gigantic and I like lots of frosting. Like I make an incredible chocolate cake with coconut frosting that is just to die for. Again, the thing about baking is if you follow the recipe, and it's a good recipe, it works. There isn't a lot of innovation there, although you do, of course, learn a few techniques over time about things to do and not do, but it doesn't require a lot of experimentation. In fact, you really can't experiment with baking.
Oh, well, I have to say that I want to come round to your house and have afternoon tea and eat one of your pies, because I love to bake a pie as well, I must admit.
You're welcome anytime.
And thank you so much for coming on Word of Mouth TV, and we hope that you have the most glorious time while you're here in Sydney.
Thank you.
So how are you finding the Sydney Writers Festival?
It's like going to the gym and having a really hard workout, but for your brain. It's absolutely fantastic. So we started at 10 o'clock this morning. I was loaded up with coffee, but just superb. Really, really enjoyed it, and really thought-provoking, smart people giving opinions and telling you how they work and their experiences. Just absolutely amazing. Really enjoyed it.
Wonderful. And so what's the best person you've seen so far?
Oh, well, my partner will be very jealous. We just saw Lee Sales. So
Yes.
It was almost like a girl fan club in there today. It was like, all her girl crushes going on. But I really enjoyed the first session that we saw, the New Power, which was just amazing.
Excellent, wonderful. And so what is the best book that you've read lately?
I'm reading 1984 again for about the umpteenth time, and I never tire of that. That's
If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot grinding into a human face forever.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Classic 1984 line, yes.
Absolutely.
And do you cook?
I do cook.
Great. So would you like to share with us your favourite cookbook?
I don't have a favourite cookbook, but I have a favourite online thing that I use, which is taste.com.au.
Yeah, Taste is pretty good, isn't it?
So very easy, simple,
So what are you going to do for the rest of the festival?
We are going to see Annabel Crabb and Lee Sales again, and Julia Zamira, and then we'll probably have a glass of wine.
Oh, sounds lovely.
I think we're going to have a glass of wine now, actually.
Yes, I wish I could have a glass of wine. So thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Here we are with the wonderful Richard Fidler, talking to him about his new book, Saga Land, which I absolutely adored. Richard, can you tell us a little bit about the book and its inspirations?
Yes, it's a book I've co-authored with my dear friend Kari Gislason, who was born in Iceland but spent most of his life in Australia. And it's Kari that introduced me to the sagas of Iceland, the stories of the first Viking settlers on that island who arrived in the Middle Ages. So our book is about our retellings of the sagas in the places where they happen, but it's also about other stories of Iceland and the search for a bloodline connection between Kauri and the greatest of the saga authors, the man who gave us Norse mythology that we have today and so many other great stories. So it's all put into this big compendium of a mess of a book.
It is not a mess of a book at all.
A great big filthy Icelandic stew of a book.
It's a perfectly composed book that I read in a single gulp. All these food metaphors. Let's talk about food. Tell us a little bit about the food in your books, Richard.
I've got in Saga Land, I put in a recipe for Icelandic fish soup, because wherever I went in Iceland, you can, no matter how small the village, they tend to have these little cafes. They're very modest. They have only about 4 or 5 things on the menu. Every one of them is really beautifully done, like it's cooked haddock or something. But nearly all of them have Icelandic fish soup, which was just heavenly, and in cold weather, oh my God, in fact I need it right now actually. It was heavenly. And in Ghost Empire, my early book, which is kind of a history of Byzantium, which I, through the eyes of me and my son going to Istanbul, which was once Constantinople. Complicated, I know. There's all sorts of bits of food in there as well to look at the daily lives of people who lived in Constantinople 1,000 years ago. They were obsessed with a thing called garum, and garum was like, well, I think something quite a lot like Vietnamese fish sauce. And you read the medieval recipe for it, so they get fish and anchovies, and they said they let it sort of fester in the sun, and then they strain the feculence from it, is the phrase, and what's left is this thing that's like a very potent and aromatic, spicy Southeast Asian fish sauce, which Northern Europeans just detested. They just hated it, but they sprinkled it on all their food to make it more delicious and more edible.
And what about you? What do you love to eat? What's your favourite meal?
I like cooking stuff out of a pot most of the time, so hence the fish soup. So I actually, when I make something, if I do cook, I don't cook as often as my wife does. My wife's a master of food. So, but when I do cook, I like to sort of do it in a big pot and cook for everyone. Make something like, I don't know, a cassoulet or a stew or a curry or something like that can be sort of shared around. And I don't like mucking around with too many dishes. I sort of like throwing it all in the pot or frying it, then putting it in the pot and creating this big stewy mess that can be eaten with bread or rice or something like that.
And so delicious as well, all the flavours in together.
Yes.
Now, my final question for you, Richard, is what is the best book that you have read recently? I know you read so much. What has been the best book?
The book I've most enjoyed was actually something I read last week, which is Tara Westover's book, Educated. I just interviewed her this week, in which we're speaking at the moment, and it's an extraordinary book. It's a memoir of her childhood and her education, really, going from rural Idaho, where she grew up in a family led by her father, who was a Mormon and a radical survivalist, in a junkyard where she was notionally homeschooled but wasn't really. She worked in the junkyard as a small girl. And then from there, sneaking almost into Brigham Young University in Utah, then going from there, getting a scholarship to Oxford, and then a fellowship at Harvard. And so she's about to become Dr. Tara Westover now from the most unlikely circumstances. But it's written in this kind of, Gothic's a bit of an easy way to put it, but it's more, what does it remind me of? It reminds me of, it's almost like a medieval story in a way, of a modern day medieval tale, which is what makes it so compelling.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time, Richard. It's been such a pleasure. And thank you for joining us again.
Thank you, Kate.
Hi, so you're here at the Sydney Writers Festival. Are you enjoying it?
Oh, I'm loving it. Yes. I come every year.
That's great. So who did you see today?
So I haven't seen anyone today. I've been sitting reading a poetry book because it's an opportunity for me to do that. But I'm going to see Annabel Crabb, and then I'm going to see Jennifer Egan, and then I'm going to the Julia Gillard session this evening.
Sounds fantastic. Yeah. So and what are you reading at the moment?
So I've finished the Caitlin mailing book, Conversations I've Never Had, and I loved that. And I've just picked up Jennifer Egan's short stories, Emerald City, which I'm about to read, or at least one of those stories before I see her this afternoon.
Wonderful. And so what is the best book that you've read lately?
The best book I've read lately, I've been reading Anne Patchett's book, The Story of a Happy Marriage, which is a collection of her freelance journalism work, and has a terrific piece in it on writing.
Right.
And because I'm an historian and I write non-fiction, I really enjoyed reading the way that Anne Patchett talks about writing her fiction. It's the same interesting struggle of of having to park yourself in a chair and really work very hard at what you do. So for me, this is a lovely experience because I come here to see how the outcome of all of those writing projects have gone for many, many authors. I have to say, probably my favourite session so far has been the Junot Diaz session, the conversation that he was in on his own on Thursday evening. That was terrific. I really enjoyed seeing him. He's such a remarkable writer.
Yes, there's some amazing people here. We've really enjoyed ourselves as well. So do you cook?
I do. I love it.
Oh, awesome. Wonderful. Because part of word of mouth is all about, there's a food element to it. And so we're just wondering, what is your favourite cookbook?
My favourite cookbook? That's a really great question. Probably Stephanie Alexander's The Cook's Companion. I mean, is that a bit of a trope? But it's such an Australian cookbook.
She's amazing though, isn't she? It's a good, and it's beautifully produced, the hardback cover in particular. And
well, you know what's great about it is not so much even the recipes, but the reference sections for each ingredient that are about what you can match something with.
Yes.
So you know when you do that kind of cooking that's called fridge shaking, where you throw open the door, you count the people you're feeding, you think, what have I got? Those sections of The Cook's Companion where you can say, well, I need to match blah with blah blah, actually really helps. It's fantastic.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, so it allows that kind of flexibility that you need sometimes.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us and your time here today. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Okay, thanks.
Excited to be here talking to Annabel Crabb because she's such an inspiration to us. We love your show.
Thank you very much.
And we love your cookbook. You want to show it?
Which Kate has actually handed this to me. I don't actually walk around with it just going.
This is my copy that Annabel's going to sign for me to add to my collection. So Annabel, what I would really love to know is I'd like to know a lot about you and your childhood and what led you to your fascinating career.
Well, I grew up in country South Australia on a farm. I read a lot when I was a kid because, it's reasonably isolated. My family never throws anything out, so I had lots of books that had belonged to my grandparents, and so I chewed my way through a lot of some quite random books, really. I also used to be obsessed with going to country fairs and buying stacks this high of Reader's Digest. I was completely obsessed with reading that magazine, which is very weird. My mum is a great cook, and most of my great memories of childhood are being in the kitchen with her. So I wasn't a completely mad cook in my teenage years, I reckon, but probably in my late 20s I started really getting into it, and when I had children is when I started really going into overdrive, and that's when I sort of started baking.
It's because you've got to cook every day, don't you? And so if you're not going to drive yourself mad with boredom, you want to try different things.
You do, and I actually find cooking really relaxing as well. Like
so I
don't do yoga because I always get anxious about how much time I'm, sorry yoga people, wasting. I can't sit there and meditate because I just think I could have done
10 things by now.
Yeah, but I get the same, I think, relaxation out of cooking than others would from being cross-legged. So that's good.
So what is your favourite dish to cook? Or one of your favourites?
Okay, so I often spend a lot of time thinking about, what I would cook if I was just cooking for me, because I never am just cooking for me. And the problem is that if I am ever in the house by myself, I get complete options paralysis, and then I end up having cheese and crackers. Like, it's just
peanut butter toast.
But I think if I my incredibly quick favourite meal is to cook up some pasta, usually just something, a sort of a macaroni type pasta, and when the pasta's nearly done, throw in some frozen peas and then drain it all, and then squeeze of lemon, olive oil, lots and lots of cracked pepper, and shredded mint and crumbled feta.
That is one of my favourite dishes.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that combination.
Yeah,
so easy.
Yeah, very fresh,
delicious.
and so I could just eat that till the cows come home, I think.
All right, so what is your worst ever cooking disaster?
Okay, I cooked a dessert for Helen Garner once.
Oh, really?
And it was a disaster.
Oh.
And it's because I was living in London, and my friend was friends with Helen Garner, and he just mentioned one day, oh, you know the writer Helen Garner, she's coming around for dinner. I'm like, invite me to your house too, please, which he did, because he's nice.
Yeah.
I said, I'll bring dessert. But it was early in my dessert career, and I think I was so overwhelmed at the thought of making something for Helen Garner that I kind of made this I went off the plantation, really, and I made this tart, but it wasn't really a tart. It was kind of a cheesecake, but it kind of had a crust, and it was sort of baked. It collapsed. It was not nice, and I was terribly embarrassed. But anyway, I did raise this with Helen recently, and she said she had no recollection at all of the dish, so that's nice, isn't it?
So at least it wasn't a bad memory.
No,
no memory is better
and
than
she was
a bad memory.
completely charming,
Of course she was.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And so you, of course, have amazing cookbooks with your name on them. But what's your favourite cookbook? What?
I go through fads with cookbooks, and anything by Hetty McKinnon, I just absolutely am all over like a rash. She's got a new one coming out very soon, which I'm beside myself with excitement about. Ottolenghi, of course, I've got every single cookbook that he's ever published. And the one that I've really been cooking out of lately, I got for Christmas last year, and it's a bewitching cookbook, is Mark Best's cookbook called Best Kitchen Basics. And some of the recipes are not basic at all, but they're just, I don't know, it's beautifully written, it's funny, it's irreverent, it's totally random. Like, there'll be... The recipe that I've been really experimenting with is kingfish ham, making ham out of kingfish. It takes about 5 weeks, and I love a long recipe, so, where you've got a real sense of achievement at the end. Oh my gosh, he's also got a recipe for 47 egg yolk tagliatelle, which...
47 egg yolks.
There's something so great about that, like not 48, which would be obvious. Yes. It's 47. Anyway, it's great pasta, and it will give you an immediate heart attack, of course, because...
And I have to say, I love the word bewitching. It's one of my own personal favourite words. Right. So any cookbook that has been called bewitching, I'm going to have to get
on it.
Yeah,
you will not regret it.
Now, my very final question for you today is, I know that you love to read and that you read a lot. What are the best books that you've read recently?
Well, I've been on a bit of a Sydney Writers Fest hammering kind of process. So I just finished The Trauma Cleaner by Sarah Krasnostein.
I bought it today.
It is astounding.
Is
it's an unusual book, but it tells you the story of a person and also the story of what happens to people when things go wrong, with a shadow of redemption. And the thing I love about it too is that the author is present but mysteriously so throughout. You find out little scraps about her life as well. I loved it. I really thought it was an awesome book.
I'm looking forward to it very much.
Well, again, you won't regret that purchase at all.
Thank you so much, and thank you for coming and being on Word of Mouth TV with us. We're very pleased to have you. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Nice to see you.
Thanks.
What an amazing day.
I know. It's been incredible, hasn't it? But wait till you see the lineup we have in part 2.